BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Thomas Duncan. This is the Scottish Football Podcast, and today, Tuesday the 1st of October, we're turning our attention towards Western Germany and the Signal Iduna Park, to be precise.
I'm not looking for perfection, I'm just looking for us to be really, really difficult to play against and give everything we have. But we also know that we have a game that can hurt teams as well, with our football and our speed. So I'm really excited about seeing that.
Brendan Rodgers is in confident mood as his Celtic side prepare to face the Yellow Wall in the Champions League. And no wonder.
In it comes again, it's a near post delivery, goal! Celtic in front! Liam Scales at the near post was the man with the header!
We'll assess their chances against Borussia Dortmund and find out what we can expect from last year's finalists. And
I've been involved in Celtic teams myself where you're away from the Champions League or away from, but when I was a player was always really, really proud. It was the home games that got us through. I think this Celtic team is slightly different though. I think they've got a slightly different mentality.
We'll also hear from former Celtic winger Aiden McGeady.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
I'm delighted to say this morning I'm joined both by Derek Rae, the lead Bundesliga commentator for worldwide viewers on ESPN. Derek, great to have your insight on German football as always, and alongside him, Alan Morrison, the man behind the Celtic by Numbers blog and also one of the co-hosts of the Huddle Breakdown podcast. So much to discuss with both, and of course we're going to hear from Aiden McGeady as well. Before we get into it properly though, Derek, I think the last time you were on before the Euros, you translated Tony Kroos's word for the Scotland team, unangenehm, which was, I think, kind of unpleasant, obdurate, difficult to play against, which turned out not to be the case, of course. Is there a German word that could currently describe this Borussia Dortmund team?
The best German word I could think of would be launisch, which would be moody. I think that is the way they are at the moment. Yeah, they're trying to kind of find a balance between the different components of the team. And in attack, if anybody watched the game against Bochum, which is a small derby on Friday, they'll have seen this moodiness within the team. Defensively, they're quite brittle, and we've seen that in the recent Bundesliga games. Even going back to Heidenheim when they conceded a couple of times, Stuttgart when they were taken apart, quite frankly, and then Bochum when they had to come from 2-0 down, could have been 3-0 down to win the game. So what it tells you is, they have some deficiencies at the back. There's a lack of stability, and the sporting director, Sebastian Kehl, has said that the big problem he thinks really is I'll use a good German word for this one, the Restverteidigung, which essentially is the defence after you've lost the ball. So the structure of your defence straight after you've lost the ball. I think that's crept into English as well now. People talk about rest defence, but that's come from the German word Restverteidigung, I think influenced heavily by Jurgen Klopp, bringing that to the English-speaking world. So that's been a problem, that structure after they've lost the ball. Also, their challenging has not been particularly good. And Kehl has also said they need to take on more responsibility generally. But in attack, they're very good, and individual quality is there, whether you're talking about Jamie Gittens on one side or Karim Adeyemi, who's left-footed, often plays on the right, on the other. Julian Brandt, who's a classy player, but not always the match winner we think he should be. And then a complete striker in Serhou Guirassy, who they signed from Stuttgart, 28 goals in 28 Bundesliga matches last season, second only to Harry Kane in the Bundesliga. And then you've got these two players in the centre of midfield, Emre Can and Pascal Gross, who came from Brighton and gets on the ball just about more than any other player, takes a lot of the set plays as well. So you have this kind of moody, schizophrenic Dortmund team. They can be very, very good, and they can, come up with 2 or 3 goals in a hurry, or they can be bad defensively, all in the same game.
Yeah, it should make for an intriguing contest. Before we get properly stuck into it, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Brendan Rodgers hopes Celtic's Champions League acid test away to Borussia Dortmund will see his side take their game to the next level. On the domestic front, they'll also face a Saturday night trip to Tynecastle to face Hearts in November after the latest round of TV games was announced. Steve Clarke has no shortage of injury worries to contend with as he prepares to name his Scotland squad later for the Nations League games against Croatia and Portugal. Scott McKenna, John McGinn, Tommy Conway and Ryan Gauld are the latest doubts for the double-header. And Dundee have announced that midfielder Mo Silla has been released from hospital and is recovering at home after going into anaphylactic shock at half-time during Saturday's match with Aberdeen. Right, on to the main event, and it doesn't really get much bigger than this for Celtic, does it, Alan? I don't remember Celtic ever being as confident going into an away game in the Champions League against such a storied opponent. And what is creating that confidence?
Yeah, listen, I would say there's a lot of nervous energy. I think there are people getting a wee bit giddy given the way the team is playing. And I think it does stem from that, and it stems a lot really from Brendan Rodgers and the coherence with which he's been able to assert a style of play upon the Celtic team, which I think has it really operating well above the sum of its parts. When you think about when the season started, many of Celtic's opening games were played without a single new signing in the outfield position, and yet the team looked to have moved forward. And it was very redolent, actually, of Ange Postecoglou's second season, where there was a lot of growing pains as the team developed through that first season, personnel changes, a whole squad revamp, injuries and so forth. And in season two, it really did start to click. And even players who had struggled badly, like Karl Starfelt, suddenly looked like they were comfortable within the system they were being asked to operate. And so it is with Celtic. If you were to what we talk about on the Huddle Breakdown constantly is in terms of risks where Celtic vulnerable in these sort of games, and you're generally going to talk about the left-hand side of the pitch. You're generally going to talk about that little triangle of Greg Taylor, Liam Scales, Rio Hatate in terms of their defensive capabilities, their work off the ball, especially Hatate, the Taylor's recovery pace or lack of, and Scales' tendency to get caught under the ball. All of those things, in terms of the risks inherent in that, have reduced this season because of the strength of the collective. And I think that's really where Rodgers has put his mark on it. He's been also allowed to bring in the players he wants to bring in. He's been able to discard the players that he doesn't want. The new signings are fitting in well. And fitting in a way which has been non-disruptive, even to the extent that Matt O'Reilly, who was kind of mission critical to Celtic, is kind of Matt who I'm being facetious, but his absence has not been yet felt. But it's in these games. It will be in these games that we'll really see if that cohesion scales to the level of intense attacking that we're going to see against this Dortmund side.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned obviously the form Celtic have been in this season, 9 from 9, scoring goals for fun, but it is always how that translates to winning 6-0 at McDermott Park up in to then go to Signal Iduna Park, and can they do the same thing? And I guess it's hard to know the answer to that, Alan, until we actually see it unfold.
Yeah, true, but I would argue, having watched the Bochum game on Friday, that Bochum set up like a quite traditional SPFL team with a very narrow block 4-4-2, crammed the midfield, played long balls up to a basketball player up front. And it was very redolent of how a lot of teams play against Celtic in the SPFL. Now, I'm not saying that Bochum are of the same level as some of the smaller teams in the SPFL, but to be honest with you, it looked to me that the gap between Dortmund and Bochum in the end, as far as talent and sheer ability, especially off the bench, was similar actually in many ways. So I think it's a problem for a lot of clubs and a lot of leagues, to be honest with you. But I do take your point, and that is the challenge: is that cohesion. How does it stress? How does it operate under the stresses it's going to be put under tonight?
Derek, I loved your word to describe Dortmund. We'll go with moody. From the outside looking in, they're such a hard team to get a read on. Reached the Champions League final last season, yet finished 5th in the Bundesliga. They've been okay this season. Obviously, got thumped the other week by Stuttgart, as you mentioned, but generally have been winning games. Obviously, new manager in Nuri Sahin, who's a young coach. Can we really turn up tonight with any certainty about what Dortmund are going to bring?
Not really. I think that is what you have to say about Dortmund. You look at the points total, it's respectable, but it's nothing amazing. And the Stuttgart result does stand out. That performance stands out as well. It wasn't good enough. And Nuri Sahin is interesting because he was brought in originally as assistant to Edin Terzic last January. And, he's a very respected figure at the club. He was a terrific player. And the idea was he would come in and help to steady things. He would be that ex-player who the players on the staff could relate to and could work with. And now he has the job in his own right. And we're still looking for an identity, at least I am. When I look at Dortmund, when I compare and contrast them with, Bayern and Leverkusen, who met in the colossal showdown on Saturday, the top two teams here in Germany at the moment, when you compare and contrast with them, Dortmund are found wanting. I would say at the moment they are the fourth or fifth best team here in Germany. You have Bayern and Leverkusen, you have Leipzig, who I think are actually better than them. You have Stuttgart, who might be, certainly a head-to-head contest were better than them. So it's a matter of how Şahin is able to sort of put his own imprint on the team, and we just haven't really seen that yet. So it's a funny kind of analysis situation when you look at Dortmund. What are they good at? They're good at sometimes, attacking very quickly, using players like Adeyemi and Gittins to good effect. And they have in Guirassy somebody who has only just joined the club, but already you see the quality that he had in Stuttgart. And he's somebody who Celtic will have to be mindful of. Nuri Şahin, incidentally, has spoken very fondly of Brendan Rodgers. He knows him, of course, from their past. It wasn't a particularly happy time for him as a player, but what he said is, he's from Northern Ireland, but he feels he has a strong Spanish influence, that maybe he should have been Spanish rid, but there's great respect there. And I thought it was also interesting when talking about Celtic, that he said, are Celtic, he was asked, are Celtic the underdogs here? He said, no, I'm sorry, when you look at a winning record like that, Celtic can't be underdogs, and he's going to say things like that as the coach of Dortmund in a home game. They're expected to win these home games. But I think he knows that in Celtic, you have a team playing well, full of confidence, with a manager that he rates, and with one or two ingredients that might trouble Dortmund in the current state.
Yeah, I wonder if perhaps one of the elements, Derek, is of Dortmund being a bit unpredictable and maybe not being a strong defensive thing. Obviously, they've lost Marco Reus, Mats Hummels. Is it a team, a young head coach in Şahin, as we've just mentioned, is it a team that perhaps lacks a bit of leadership, a bit of experience now? Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and it's a strange thing on one level to say, because they do have experienced players in their ranks. Yeah, you're right. They've said goodbye to the Mats Hummels era. That probably had to happen. They've said goodbye to Marco Reus. Legends will always be thanked for his efforts in Dortmund. Great footballer. But they did need to move on from that era, I feel. So they have experience. Emre Can, Pascal Gross are very experienced players there in the centre of midfield. Niklas Süle has bags of experience. So, we can use that word experience to sum up many players on the squad. But leaders, are there true leaders there? I don't see as many, And, the new signings they've brought in, Valdemar Anton from Stuttgart, he's made a bit of a wobbly beginning. He'll likely play in central defence alongside Nico Schlotterbeck, who's naturally left-footed, good passer, but sometimes has mistakes in him. But those two will play together at the back. So it's just a sort of strange coming together. But when they do come together, they can be devastating. And I won't be surprised if there are times in the game tonight when colleagues from Scotland, Celtic fans look at Dortmund and go, "Oh, that was brilliant." They're really good. But then you will sometimes see something pretty horrific. Whether that's a mistake from a player like Schlotterbeck. The fullbacks for me are just ordinary. They're okay. If it is Süle at right back, that's not his usual position, but he can play there. Looks a bit slow, but he's actually, if you look at the Bundesliga stats, he's one of the fastest defenders in the Bundesliga. So you have these sort of contradictions out there on the pitch, and I think it's just about trying to get it all together. What I would say is, against Club Brugge in the previous round in the Champions League, they won with relative ease. So I would say this as a Bundesliga commentator. I think sometimes the standard of the Bundesliga is downplayed a bit by people who don't follow it every week. So I think that in the Bundesliga, you sometimes have tests that are greater than you get in the Champions League. I'm not for one moment suggesting that's going to be the case with Celtic, because I think this will be an examination for Dortmund, but it's worth bearing in mind.
Alan, big blow that Cameron Carter-Vickers isn't available for Celtic. How does that affect how they might play, if at all, or what do they lose by him being unavailable? Because that is significant, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, especially over probably 3-4 seasons now. He's been that calming defensive presence in the Celtic rear guard. He defends through. He's the sort of defender I love because he avoids issues. Issues do not arise. It's not that he deals with them; they don't happen, which is the sort of proactive defending that I love. And so you lose that with him. You lose that sort of, the ability to play that kind of high line. So, but listen, it is what it is. I mean, he was clearly struggling under this injury in the last match against Slovan Bratislava, and he actually was uncharacteristically skittish in that match. There were a few dodgy moments from him, and so it's better to have somebody fit, strong, and available than it is to have a less than fit Carter Vickers. So Austin Trusty has come in. He's obviously a bit unknown to Celtic fans yet. He's only had 2 appearances. He's been steady, to be honest with you. Obviously, he's not really been tested that much against Falkirk, and more so against Falkirk, to be fair, and less so against St Johnstone. He looks, again, he's 6'3", he's fast, he's strong, but obviously it really is a case of how does he fit into the collective unit, because Trusty may have a good game, but unless the collective unit responds to the threats that Dortmund have, it's going to be a long old evening. And in terms of, does it change the way that Celtic approach the game? I don't think it will. I think if we go back to sort of Rodgers' version 1 in his first time at Celtic, we would have seen. I think we would have ended up in a sort of transition warfare in this match. He would have looked at Dortmund, seen the weaknesses in their team, especially against the ball, and gone for it. And we would have ended up with this incredible basketball match. I think Rodgers is a bit more circumspect now. I don't think we'll see that. I don't think just because there are weaknesses that we'll throw everything at them. We have to defend well. I mean, there's a to be a little bit sort of boring and circumspect, the way that this Champions League group, if you like, is going to play out. We've got a +4 goal advantage at the moment, +4 goal difference. And I suspect at the end we'll be one of those teams that hopefully are in that sort of 8, 9, 10 point category. And I think goal difference is going to be critical. So I don't think we're going to go out. I don't think we want to go out and try and get hammered. Having said all that, you couldn't watch that game against Bochum and all the issues that Derek described. Very interested to hear what Cale had said about the perceived weaknesses, because what I saw was a team that was fractured. You had such an enormous physical disconnect between the defending 5 and the attacking 5. Enormous chasm in the middle of the pitch that I think Celtic can fill with their athletic, young, creative midfielders. Julian Brandt, highly talented individual. He's not going to sit on Callum McGregor, right? So McGregor's going to have. I think McGregor's potentially going to have a lot of the ball and being able to dictate. I'm going for the upsides here, and then obviously they were insisting on playing a very high line, despite the lack of pace that they had in the rear of the team. And obviously Celtic are built for these kind of games with Kuhn, Kyogo, and Maeda to hit teams on the break, and I think that's where Celtic can get joy. That's my upside view of it.
Yeah, you've got to pick out the positives, absolutely, Alan, and why not? Well, one man who's no stranger to big Champions League nights for Celtic is the current Ayr United's winger, Aiden McGeady. Including qualifiers, he played in the competition 28 times for the club, scoring 2 goals, and Andrew Petrie caught up with him ahead of the match against Dortmund.
Aiden, thank you for taking the time. Just firstly, you played in lots of big Champions League nights for Celtic. What's the most memorable one for you personally?
A few good nights, a few bad nights as well, a few hard nights. Most memorable, probably, personally, probably against Benfica at home.
McGeady, 25 yards out on his right foot, turning inside right foot, strike, deflection, goal Celtic! Aiden McGeady delivers! It took a deflection en route. Scott McDonald was in there too. But McGeady gets
probably the most complete performance that I've had to date. That's just a personal level, but in terms of collective point of view, it would probably be when we played Barcelona in the last 16 at Parkhead. We lost 3-2, but we played very, very well that night. But we were up against the start of a dynasty really in that Barcelona team. Ronaldinho, Messi, Thierry Henry, just an unbelievable team to play against with unbelievable players. So memorable from that point of view.
Absolutely. You get any shirts on that game?
That night I got Puyol. Puyol was playing right back. Normally he's a centre half, but he was playing right back. I was playing directly against him, so managed to get past him a few times. Managed to take the ball off me a few times as well. But yeah, just an amazing night, because it was like that might have been the first time we were in the last 16. Or was it the second time? But it was the atmosphere that night. I think we were leading 2-1 at half time.
Celtic have got 5 men inside the Barcelona half. Aiden McGeady has to deliver. Goes across the park. Gets away from Iniesta. Clips it high. Looking for Robson. Oh, good header. Goal! Barry Robson! Stretching there. Sent a looping header up and over Victor Valdez. Absolutely.
And I think Messi scored. Gary Caldwell almost clotheslined him when he dragged the ball past him.
Eto on the outside, good quick feet, still he's going, infield to the edge of the area, slides it across, comes up McManus, falls for Messi again, wriggles away from Caldwell and buries the ball into the bottom right hand corner of the net. It was a wonderful change of feet. It's a double for Lionel Messi. Celtic's long and...
But that was the start of seeing Messi, on his way to being the best player in the world. Or the best of all time, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I don't think too many would disagree. Well, speaking of unbelievable atmospheres, how do you think Celtic's game against Dortmund is going to go? They'll be up against it, but they did really well against Slovan Bratislava.
Yeah, Celtic were very, very good against Slovan Bratislava. I think people will talk about the standard of the team, but listen, you can only beat what's in front of you. I think Celtic had a very, very dominant performance that night, and your first Champions League game of the season, to score that many goals and have that free-flowing attacking football, the way they kind of mirrored their domestic form, must have been fantastic for Brendan Rodgers to see that and be able to implement that into a European game. A lot has been levelled at the team to carry on that domestic form into Champions League, and so far in the one game they've played, they're absolutely fantastic.
Forrest picks up and then begins to drive forward, looks to slip in, he does a wonderful ball, and number 5 for Celtic, and it's Armida off and running.
The Dortmund game will be a different test, of course, away from home. I've been involved in Celtic teams myself where your away form, the Champions League is our away form. But when I was a player, was always really, really poor. It was the home games that got us through. I think this Celtic team are slightly different though. I think they've got a slightly different mentality. That game against Slovan Bratislava, like I said, I don't think the opposition were a top European team, but they played very, very well that night. There was a lot of really good performances, and I think the way Celtic are playing at the minute, like you said, Celtic will be up against it, but I think Celtic would back themselves to get a result against Dortmund.
And you talked about the mentality maybe being a little different with Celtic now. Tactically, I suppose, what do they maybe need to do against Dortmund to come away with a positive result, and who will the key men be? Tactically,
we can second guess Brendan Rodgers and the way he's going to set his team up, and if he's going to be slightly more pragmatic than in the past, because that's been one thing that has never really happened. And listen, that's why Brendan Rodgers is a top manager. He has his team playing the way that they play at all times and don't really change for anyone. So it'll be interesting to see how the team's set up. I do think Celtic will have to be slightly more defensive against Dortmund. Dortmund are still a top team. I mean, it was only last season in the Champions League final, but people are kind of overlooking that. I think it's the majority of that team is still the same squad. But Dortmund haven't been firing all cylinders this season either, and Celtic have. So I think Celtic can take a lot of confidence from a domestic form and the first Champions League game against Slovan Bratislava. I do think, like I said, I think they do have to be slightly more defensive and look to be slightly more counter-attacking and build into the game and not just go gung-ho and play completely expansive football, because that could be the side's undoing. And I think this campaign is one with this new format. I think it's one that the team want to stamp their authority on, because like I said, a lot's been levelled against the team in the past about not translating that domestic form into European form. You mentioned the new format. Obviously, it's quite hard to predict given it's all new for all of us. But looking at the bigger picture, how do you think they'll do generally, and do you think they should be expected to progress? Yeah, I do think Celtic will be looking to progress. The team and the fans are always going to back the squad to progress. I think the manager would be coming out and saying that, of course. And I think, if I've been totally honest, when you've seen not the group but the fixtures came out, I think you looked at it and you thought that's a good set of fixtures if you're looking to progress. Because in the old format, you would always have one absolutely top team, a second really good team, Celtic maybe third, and then there's a kind of smaller European team. But this kind of format now, I mean, it's still hard to get your head around it a little bit, but I think if you look at the fixtures, I mean, I don't think there's anybody that Celtic will be up against that they're going to be frightened of, and you go, that's going to be a really, really difficult game. Dortmund and Villa are going to be the two most difficult games. The rest, I think you can see Celtic picking up a good amount of points, but this game against Dortmund will be a big test. And look, I think it's something will be a very good marker for Brendan Rodgers and his squad.
Aidan, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem, thanks a lot.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Right, that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Many thanks to Derek Rae, Alan Morrison and Aiden McGeady, and thank you for listening. Remember, you can listen to Borussia Dortmund against Celtic on BBC Radio Scotland Extra from 6 o'clock tonight. You can also keep up to date with all the live action on the BBC Sport website and app, and you can catch all the Champions League highlights on BBC One Scotland and the iPlayer on Wednesday evening. And of course, we'll be here with the Scottish Football Podcast every day, so be alerted when new episodes are out. You have to subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Thanks very much again for your company. Have a good rest of the week. It's bye for now.
This is the shocking moment English football has been dreading.
My name is Moses Swabu, and I used to be a professional footballer, but then I got in deep with organised crime and became a match fixer operating in the English League.
A match-fixing investigator has highlighted 2 matches he says appear to have suspicious betting patterns.
How honest are you going to be with me?
This is 100%. Join me for Sports Strangest Crimes presents Confessions of a Match Fixer. Listen on BBC Sounds.